So the Harvard lawsuit is really complicated to come to terms with, because on one hand, like, I do think it was unfair to kind of classify or categorize a lot of Asians as having like no character on the basis of their kind of ethnic makeup.
Really heavily involved with this community theater, and I would be the only non-white guy on stage, and I'd be referred to by the patrons as, oh, that Asian kid, or even sometimes, oh, that Oriental kid. And I'm like, and that one is especially ironic because I literally did a production of Avenue Q in which I played Princeton, and there's that entire song about everyone's a little bit racist sometimes, and they sort of make fun of the whole Oriental term. And then even after that performance, I was still being referred to as the Oriental actor. Yeah.
For me, like, my racial identity used to be something that it felt like a chip on my shoulder, like conforming to the stereotypes, or, you know, even sometimes whether I was safe or not, or whether I was being judged. But here I definitely feel a lot more comfortable, a lot more content with that part of my identity.
Because the thing with Asian Americanness is that it's not like a cohesive identity. It's just so big,
right?
And that's not like to say that this is like different from other groups. It's just like my experience with like Asian Americans is so big and vast, and people come from different backgrounds. And I think like me being I'm like ethnic Chinese, but my family's been in Malaysia for like 4 generations, so I don't even like feel that like in close community with like other ethnic Chinese people. So there's like the expectation of being like within like all these other Asian American, this larger Asian American population is just like so weird. And so I think when I came here, like thinking about the Asian American community, I was just, I don't know, I didn't like, I felt like I had so many like these weird nuances that I didn't understand, and I thought that, and I don't think it's like as much as I used to, but I thought that everyone else was like more engaged with this like monolithic Asian Americanness than I was, so I didn't feel like comfortable participating, or like didn't want to.
I don't know, when I'm talking to like, when I'm with a lot of my other friends that aren't Asian, I feel like it doesn't come up that much, but like if we ever like do talk about race, like I think people are generally like pretty sensitive about it. Like you'll see people like try to be really respectful.
In my life before Princeton, I had a lot of experience with like prejudice or the model minority stereotype, and here I feel like people don't apply those stereotypes as much, so I really appreciate that.
Because we are like the model minority, sometimes it feels like our issues are sort of swept under the rug or like are trivialized, and like that's something that really bothers me, is like sometimes like people assume that we're fine, like we're like harmless, or we're like not suffering, you know, from a lot of other issues that, you know, definitely like other minorities are suffering from.
So one of the thoughts and / observations that I've had is that, like, I hear a lot of Asian Americans talk about how people assume they're not from the United States and how that's hurtful to them, because for a lot of them, kind of the United States is like the only home they've ever known. And it's unfair to assume just because someone's like ancestors or their parents came from somewhere else, like they necessarily have to identify with that same country. And on my side of the equation, when people assume I'm not from the United States, it's not as hurtful because that's true. Like there is another place that I can call home. And I was raised in such a way to believe that my primary identity is as a Korean, not as an American. It's less hurtful when people don't assume I'm from here, because that's the truth. Whereas for Asian Americans, I think that can be a very jarring experience.
I'm trying to think. At least with I think one huge thing that Asian girls have, or like Asian like girl identifying persons, is that like just dealing with like guys of other racial backgrounds, like objectifying you in that way. I've just like dealt with so many guys at Princeton who have like an Asian girl thing. That's like very real. And I think they're like whisper networks of like, okay, we like know which ones to like to watch out for, and like I think we like watch out for each other in that way. Right. But I think that's like a really like specific thing that I've experienced. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So actually, in my college application process, I actually leaned more towards putting myself in the Pacific Islander box, because at that time, even just 4 years ago, there wasn't really any sort of, you click Asian and then you specify Filipino. It's just one blanket Asian, and I felt that if I had done that, I'd get looped in with a lot of other ethnicities that I didn't necessarily relate to. So I can definitely. So yeah, when that entire thing came up, I was like, yeah, I can't put it in words.
This issue of affirmative action at Harvard is specifically a case about like mostly like middle class East Asian and South Asian folks kind of trying to ensure their students and their children's admittance into an elite institution. And that is what seems to define Asian American activism, this kind of solely focusing on, not even like, totally obscuring the ways that affirmative action, as imperfect a tool as it is, does allow, so many Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to be able to have access to education.
Okay, for the Harvard lawsuit, I have mixed feelings. I feel like it kind of weirded me out that the Harvard admissions officers were saying the kind of things they did, like Asian students not having personalities. Like that really kind of struck me, and I started wondering like what they wrote about me, like when they were considering me for Princeton and like other schools.
But like I do know, for instance, that like people who oppose affirmative action traditionally because they think that it disadvantages, the majority people, like white people, they're behind the Asian American lawsuit because they're like, yeah, this is why affirmative action sucks, but they're fighting for like completely different things. Whereas on one side, a lot of Asian Americans are saying like, look, you're stereotyping us, this is really unfair. The other side is saying like, the system is bad because it's like disadvantaging like white students. So there are two different arguments, but co-opting the same case, and like that's why it gets really complicated, and that's why I think the Harvard lawsuit is a little challenging in terms of like saying like, oh, I believe X versus I believe Y.
So I think that affirmative action, I would like, if I were asked to vote on it, I would still vote for affirmative action, but I don't think it's like a perfect system.
I mean, I got to Princeton, so it's not like it's like harmed me directly, but I can see it with like my friends who like didn't get into the schools that they wanted to, because I went to a school with like a lot of Asian Americans, and them like blaming it on affirmative action too. And I think like, so like when it's like Asians in the media, I think my first reaction is like, how dare you speak for like all of us, right? Because it's like, I mean, I don't know, sometimes they're like not even from like their like other racial backgrounds, like Asian, there's so many of us, like we're from like so many different class backgrounds too. It's just like so, and then people will perceive it as them speaking for all Asian Americans too.
Right.
So that's like incredibly frustrating.
Affirmative action holds Asians to a higher standard, and I think that doesn't necessarily make sense because Asians still receive discrimination in like the workplace, and so making it harder for them to get into college when they do receive discrimination is not necessarily the best thing. And so I think I would be more in favor of maybe like socioeconomic affirmative action that was less race-based and more based on like how much money you have. But
I would say definitely be aware of kind of like your positionality. That's like a buzzword, so I guess like to elaborate on that, like be aware, like coming in of like how like history, how like culture, how pop culture, how your home culture, like how all of that kind of combines to define like who you are on this campus, because there are a lot of complicated histories, and it's important to kind of take a step back and like understand that.
I would say, this is really cliche, but like be true to yourself, like know who you are and kind of like be okay with it. like it's okay to maybe like not totally understand where you are in terms of like race or identity, but just like try to stay secure about yourself. Yeah.
It would be to go for it, I guess. Just to go for it, to not be too like salty or like bitter about affirmative action, and to just be the best that you can be. I don't know, that's not great advice, but
be proud of your heritage. Don't be afraid to wear it on your shoulder. And also, like, if you do experience moments in which you are, called upon as like the token Asian in the room, or asked to represent your ethnicity, do it proudly and do it loudly, because otherwise no one else will.
But the first question that was asked after she gave this whole talk about honor killings was, what is your opinion on the Harvard Affirmative Action case? And I could not believe it. I was like, this woman just gave an entire talk about something completely different, and you just want to talk about this Harvard Affirmative Action case? Yes, it's important, but that can't be the limits of what we're working for and what we're working towards, and who we care about and who we give our attention to in this really diverse coalition of Asian Americans.